Welcome to Manga's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 16, The Half-Elf Godkin. While thinking about that, Ainz cast another wall of skeleton. As he said to Mare in a message previously, fighting one-on-one is an idiotic thing to do when one really wanted to win, but he had to continue doing so this time, unless he felt like he was in danger of losing. This battle also had one more irritating factor. He had to fight with a hand tied behind his back. Ainz already concluded that Decim couldn't see through perfect, unknowable. He could easily win if he used that. But that wasn't an option. Why? What was the most likely development if he started to have an overwhelming advantage using perfect unknowable? Or, say, what would happen if he used a high-tier spell like Time Stop and outed himself as a strong opponent? Decim would likely run upon realizing that he couldn't win. Luckily, he wouldn't direct his attacks at the twins well, he couldn't be certain of that, but it was very unlikely. That guy's aim was to capture Aura and then Mare. It was reasonable to think that he would not cause them fatal harm. Ainz didn't want to let him escape without finding how Decim teleported here. He appeared suddenly, so he could probably disappear suddenly as well. No, in fact, he should imagine the worst and assume that he had the ability to do just that. If he let this guy escape, this pervert could continue to aim for Aura and Mare forever. That was one thing he certainly couldn't let happen. The twins could be standing at a dangerous precipice depending on Decim's true strength, which he was yet to be certain about. That was why he was putting into practice what he said to them with the message. He would be sure to kill Decim here and not give him a chance to escape. That was why Ainz didn't ask the twins to help. Difference in numbers was one of the main factors that decided victory. The first thing Ainz would do if he were to encounter a group of opponents of unknown strength that outnumbered his group would be to escape. He should assume that Decim would do the same. It was better not to make the enemy realize his disadvantageous situation before he could create an opportunity to take them out. So, not only did he not ask for the twins' help, but he didn't even summon any undead. His great lie about Decim being allowed to take the twins if he was defeated was also for the same reason. By restricting his opponent's actions, Ainz led his opponent into not wanting to leave the battlefield and gradually made him not able to leave it even if he wanted to. What was it again? Yeah, the Sankyu cost effect. The important thing is whether or not I can make him accumulate enough of it. I hope that he doesn't see through it. Let's just pray that he doesn't have much battle experience. I should break his will at the very least. He is scary. Upon hearing Mare's trembling voice echoing through the necklace, Aura immediately concurred. Scary. So Ainz can be this scary. Aura and Mare understood well why their master was intentionally fighting like that. To gauge his opponent, that was probably one of his aims, but that was not the only one. He was aiming for one other major objective. He was slowly dragging the opponent down like quicksand to stop him from escaping, and would then go in for the kill. When should someone choose to escape in a situation where they couldn't get a read on the other party's health? There were various opinions on this topic, but excluding cases like their attacks being completely ineffective on the opponent, it would be when their own health went below a certain threshold. Then, what if their health mostly remained the same, but it was their mana that was getting worn down? What if they already used a lot of their mana up till that point? What if they felt like they could win with just one more push? It was in everyone's nature to be reluctant to cut their losses even when they knew that was the right thing to do. That was why everyone made their own rules, from their own painful experiences and the information they had gained from others. That meant that when one's battle experience was meager and the information they had on their opponent was nearly non-existent, they would have trouble deciding on the right moment to cut their losses. Their master saw through that very point. Especially since the opponent was a king, someone haughty and inexperienced at battling others whose strength was on par with himself. He was pushing him to a point where he couldn't easily cut his losses and escape. All of those shameful utterances were bluff. Although it's rude to call him a monster, Ainz really is one when it comes to a battle of wits, isn't he? Aura's body slightly trembled. It's understandable why Demiurge said that he is someone above even him. Mare also trembled in sync. It's also awesome how he is deliberately showing the guide that he is using the scrolls. All because he is trying to hide his own strength. They couldn't help but feel fear at the deliberate actions he had taken. They also learned a lot at the same time. Both of them felt how blessed they were to have one such as him standing above them. A new wall appeared the very instant the previous one was smashed apart. Decim hid his irritation behind his smile, realizing that the opponent was uselessly stalling for time. He wondered how many times they had repeated this. Though he didn't count because it was tiresome, it should be at least 20 times by now. The walls were weak enough to break apart in a single hit, but the opponent was deploying multiple at a time to avoid Behemoth's blows. Looks will use their brains in their own way. No, it's different. Maybe I should say that they need to be so desperate because they can only use such weak magic. It was probably incorrect to call him a mook, but that undead was certainly weaker than his Behemoth. What Decim saw till now in this fight showed that he was right. If that undead was stronger than Behemoth, he would have proactively attacked them. However, all he did was fumble around while doing his best to defend against Behemoth with spells. It was like he was relying on some third party to do the real work. Sure, Behemoth was taking damage every time he broke one of the walls, but that was trivial. It was unlikely that the undead was stupid enough to think that he could take down Behemoth with that alone. His attempt to damage Behemoth bit by bit was probably a ploy to help the humans, who he's expecting to come here later. Brings tears to my eyes really. Behemoth's got far more health than you think, you know. Would your mana run out first? Another wall was smashed and he can see the next one behind it. Decim sighed. Continuing with this farce any longer would be tiresome. Maybe that was his aim all along. To make me just leave them alone because it felt tiresome. How do I quickly deal with him? He already understood that it was not wise to deal with those walls one by one, but Behemoth unfortunately didn't have any special skills. If he wanted to ignore the walls, the only other choice was to walk around them. If he did that though, the enemy would just make another wall. It would end up being a game of cat and mouse. Decim could control and order elementals stronger than him. Generally, it would be impossible to summon or control those stronger than yourself, but due to one of the jobs Decim learned, he could ignore that restriction. However, it came with the price that his mana would be gradually consumed while the summon was fighting. It was not like he had to concentrate while using Behemoth, so Decim could use magic at the same time. Although, doing that would reduce the time he could keep Behemoth active. It can't be helped. Should I just use an attack spell? Behemoth in me. He shouldn't have any leeway to create new walls while taking on both of our attacks. Decim could use 10th tier magic. A realm that the magic casters of this world could never reach even with all of their efforts. A tier only allowed for the chosen few. That said, he could only barely use it because he had specialized in summoning. He was certainly not good at it, though it should be enough to deal with something like that undead easily. But was it fine to use his precious mana like that? He hesitated, wondering if he should save it for Behemoth instead. I have to somehow make that undead understand that humans can't do anything to me. That would probably make him stop trying to buy time. He already said as much, but it didn't look like the other side believed him. No, even he could understand that it was only natural that they wouldn't believe him. One does not simply believe the enemy's words, but it's not like Decim was lying either. No one was able to beat Behemoth till now, even the ancient dragons weren't a match. Though they used second-tier magic to strengthen their bodies, they were still beaten into a pulp by Behemoth in the end. Even Decim himself would inevitably die if he turned Behemoth into his opponent. His father was probably the only one who could defeat Behemoth, but he was already dead. That meant that there was no one left who could. He's probably thinking that he can win if I exhaust my mana, but that's wrong too. The undead was likely counting on taking down a magic caster whose mana was exhausted easily. That was probably a prediction made from his own experience as a magic caster. Decim deigned to recognize that a part of its reasoning was correct. If Decim, someone who specialized in summoning, used up all of his mana and was unable to use Behemoth anymore, his battle strength would drastically drop. However, that didn't mean that he himself was weak. As someone who stood at the pinnacle of druids, his body was stronger than most living beings. The brittle human body would split into two with just a single blow from his fist. If he kicked someone who wore armor, it would leave a footprint on it, while turning the soft meat inside into pulp from the impact. He was confident that he could wipe out a human army of thousands, nay, tens of thousands, with just his bodily strength alone. Yet, if he was asked if it was alright to exhaust his mana, he couldn't be so sure. He was a bit uneasy about it as he entrusted most of his battles to Behemoth, till now. Killing a few thousand soldiers would mean that he would need to swing his fists thousands of times as well. He wouldn't know if his stamina would hold, unless he tried, and most of all. To fight directly by myself, to do an act as barbaric as dirtying this body with human blood, is unthinkable. As someone proud of his nature as an elemental user, to swing a weapon at his opponent personally was nothing but savagery to him. He wanted to avoid that kind of battle at all costs. What should he do then? I already consumed a lot of mana. I can still fight, but that doesn't mean I can do it for long using Behemoth. I will have to kill humans while keeping the grandchildren bound with magic. Taking that into account, I really don't have much leeway with my mana. He couldn't spend any more mana on that undead. Should I just ignore him and leave with the grandchildren? But he will probably just be summoned again. Then they would end up going through a similar fight again. That's not the way he wanted to do this at all. He wanted to break their will by showing them who was the stronger one. He wanted to win the battle here and imprint on them that he was their superior. Those two would continue to rebel against him if he didn't do that. So that undead had to be destroyed completely. It all comes back to this, but how should I eliminate him? All of his opponents till now were no more than brittle branches that broke with a single punch from Behemoth. He never imagined a battle where he had to chase after the opponent who scurried here and there, trying to stall for time. This was a good experience. I should practice by killing those escaping worms, as well the next time around. First, I should deal with that. Decim glared at the wall standing in Behemoth's way. Or, to be more precise, he was staring at the undead behind it. As I thought, there's no way around it. I should quickly kill him even if I have to use a large amount of mana. It's extremely inelegant that an elemental user like me has to use attack magic, but it can be helped. I don't want to fight physically, so let's just bear with it. After resolving himself to it, Decim selected a spell and activated it. Shining Burst. The 7th tier spell caused an eruption of heat and light which manifested, like the sun. The wall made of bones was blown away the instant the hemisphere of white light touched it, but the walls behind it stood undamaged. I see, so even a white area spell can't break through the inner walls. It would have been better for him if all the walls were dealt with at once, but finding out one of its characteristics was good enough. He would just have to choose a different spell next time with that information in mind. Even white area spells differed slightly, some scattered and some exploded, while others radiated outwards. Behemoth's huge right fist of stone smashed through another wall and without a pause, his left fist also brought the last wall down. He finally caught the sight of the undead who looked flustered. He will just make another wall, won't he? Then all he had to do was cast a more suitable spell based on the now known information. But what happened next was unexpected. The undead started to walk away in an attempt to create some distance from Behemoth and took an item out from under his robe. It was probably another scroll. The elves used the bark from a special kind of tree to make scrolls and could only inscribe druid spells up to the 3rd tier on them. That undead's magic was not druidic, so Decim thought that was probably how scrolls looked for spells from a different system of magic. A low-tier spell. Is he mocking me? Does he think he can defend with just that? Or do the scrolls he uses contain higher-tier spells? But when did he even get them? A special type of summon. The undead burned the scroll, activating the spell stored.